in British politics for the government to have a majority, which meant it had enough votes on its side to get all of its legislation through Parliament. That is not the case now. We have a minority government, and the DUP have abandoned the government, and Parliament now has the whip hand. What's really interesting is that party lines seem to be completely irrelevant right now. It's more about groups of MPs gathering around certain ideas for what they think should happen next. So while there appears to be a majority against the government, there is no majority for any course of action beyond that. Now, I'm going to use this bowl of fruit to demonstrate what those groups are. Please do not read anything into the fruit. It is simply the 5 things I had in my fruit bowl this morning at 9:30. So, here we go. First of all, you have the group who are prepared to vote against the government, but to end up with no deal with the European Union, to fall back on WTO rules, to have no links at all with the European Union. That group is very small, and it is unlikely to win out. In fact, it's very unpopular. You then have the group who's prepared to vote with the government and agree to Theresa May's deal with the European Union. They might not like it, it's far from perfect, but it does end freedom of movement, it allows us to have our own free trade deals, and with the backstop, allows for some security on the Northern Irish border. Then you've got the people who don't like Theresa May's deal, but they do want one of the other deals that the European Union suggested, which was the Norway Plus, which means that we leave the European Union, but we remain part of the single market, which means we don't need a border in Northern Ireland. With Norway Plus, we'd also be out of the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy and able to negotiate our own free trade deals. However, we would be absolutely taking rules from the European Union in the form of the single market and paying just as much in. The other problem with the Norway model is it makes absolutely no provision for our services, and particularly our financial services sector, which are not only the very largest part of our economy, but the reason that we're one of the biggest economies in the world, unlike Norway, which is tiny. I hope you're keeping up with this, because I tell you what, an awful lot of MPs aren't, and an awful lot of journalists aren't. I listened to John Humphreys on the Today programme this morning completely misunderstand the whole point of the Norway deal, and you're just going, you're paid to do this, mate. Right, where were we? So if you don't like any of those options so far, you might agree with Jeremy Corbyn in wanting to extend Article 50, which means that we wouldn't leave the EU in March next year, but we would go back to the European Union and try and renegotiate from scratch under a Labour government. So apart from the unfeasibility of renegotiating a deal that the EU doesn't want to renegotiate, extending Article 50 would require a change in UK legislation because it's written into law that we'll leave in March next year, and also require assent from 27 other member states. Last one, I promise. Those that want another referendum. Now, they're not all Remainers, there are a lot of Remainers, but the idea being that the only way to break the deadlock in Parliament is to go back to the people. This would require a change in legislation that would have to go through both houses of Parliament. What I'm trying to demonstrate is it's quite difficult for lemons to become plums or for tangerines to become apples. And assuming that the government loses the vote next week, I mean, what the hell is going to happen? There's no consensus, there's no leadership. What the hell are they going to do? Oh, I hope that made some sense. Anyway, I'm still doing a live tonight at 9 o'clock. I will be there. I want to answer your questions primarily, which is why I wanted to do this earlier today. So send me them in advance or be there at 9 o'clock, and I will see you then.